Hey guys, it's Mr. Narimatsu here. Hey pushers. Sorry, I didn't start off with that greeting like I usually do. Coming with you guys about, and from now on, the links are going to be right here. So it's not here, but I'm going to hyperlink the videos instead of just having it double. It kind of didn't make any sense. Oh, and one more thing. I want to apologize for my last screencast when I talked about being 6 weeks. We actually have 9 weeks in this time. So we got about 6 weeks after this week. So anyways, just a couple of updates. But today we're going to be talking about the election of 1800. Kind of there's a little review about George Washington and then really what's going on. The election of 1800 brings in Thomas Jefferson. Kind of review a couple of the presidents right now. Make sure you guys have a clue about how that's going. And definitely during Jefferson's presidency, what was happening basically foreign wise with, again, England and now Napoleonic France raging and doing their thing. And also, we'll talk about the Louisiana Purchase and its kind of problems for future issues. So, real quickly, I just Googled the U.S. presidents up here, and it, obviously goes all the way over here. Is our current president Donald Trump, but over here it goes George Washington to John Adams. So remember, these two guys are Federalists. In the year 1800, we have the election, and Thomas Jefferson, who is now the leader of a new party, what was called the Anti-Federalist that he worked with, again, especially against Hamilton. He is now part of the Democratic Republicans, excuse me. And later, Andrew Jackson, we'll just call them the Democrats, right? But he is called the Democratic Republicans. So we have a new party that's gotten created. The Anti-Federalists have changed their names to Democratic Republicans, and we still have the Federalists. He wins. Thomas Jefferson wins. And what's interesting, too, is Thomas Jefferson is the vice president underneath John Adams. Back in those times, guys, it was actually decided whoever got the second amount of votes for president, the second would be the vice president. So you often have now different parties that have different presidents at that time. They changed that in a constitutional amendment later. So this is kind of why you're like, if you kind of look more in John Adams' presidency, Thomas Jefferson's the vice president, and they're basically kind of almost at war with each other. They have completely different ideas, and that's usually because that's what happens. Somebody of the other party would usually get second place and be against your ideas. So that would be the vice president. So anyways, under Thomas Jefferson, it's known as the Peaceful Revolution because it's changing power from the Federalists under George Washington and John Adams to now the Democratic Republicans. And we've changed power to a different political party without any type of fights, any type of issues. So a lot of people kind of claim this as our transition to different parties and democracy. And one thing that James Madison in his Federalist Papers kind of warned against was this rise of Federalist parties. And George Washington tried to do that, try to stop as much as possible by including the Anti-Federalists in his cabinet, as advisors in the White House to advise him what to do. But ultimately, the two-party system, because of the Electoral College and winning a majority of votes, it usually is just better to have two candidates, right? Rather than just, you're always going to have two kind of opposing sides and them winning, trying to win 51%. So for reasons due to human nature, reasons due to politics, and reasons because of our political system and how we create presidents and how we elect presidents, really a two-party system gets created. So we'll always have two parties. Sometimes one of the parties will splinter up. And this is kind of the case that happened later. We'll talk about the War of 1812, where you kind of have these splinter groups within a party. So anyways, we'll develop more and more of that. So this is really, most of our work today is about Thomas Jefferson. And again, here's some just stuff from the Democratic Republicans, a lot of stuff we already talked about. Democratic Republicans, they supported France. They were really strong for the farmers and the poor. They were definitely against merchants and the bankers and what they would call the industrialists of the Northeast. They believe state government should have more right. If it is in the Constitution, you can't do it. In other words, a very strict interpretation of the Constitution. Whereas the Federalists were kind of more pro-British. They created the Bank of the U.S. underneath Hamilton. They believed in a stronger federal government. And if it's not in the Constitution, if it's necessary and proper, whatever that means, let's go ahead and do it. So remember that the Anti-Federalists have now changed their name to the Democratic Republicans underneath Thomas Jefferson, okay? And we still have the Federalists rocking and rolling. After the War of 1812, the Federalists are going to look a little backwards. They're going to be considered so pro-British while the British are burning down the White House that people will say, we're no longer going to support you as a party because you kind of look like a bunch of traitors. there's kind of two issues happening during Thomas Jefferson's time that you need to be aware of. First thing is the United States is a young country and it wants to trade, right? So it's sending its ships across the Atlantic all over. And one of the areas it's going to is the Mediterranean Sea. During this time, guys, it's really like, like Pirates of the Caribbean stuff. Like literally pirates are running all around here and they're raging stuff. And this is true of in the Mediterranean, where we occasionally will have our ships come in with their goods to go ahead and trade with any areas in the Mediterranean. In Libya and Tripoli, there was a place, there's basically these things called the Barbary Pirates, called the Barbary Coast right here. And these pirates would basically attack the ships. For a long time, the United States received protection because England would send their British ships with American vessels to protect them when they're colonies. Well, now that the United States is on its own and doesn't have the protection, basically these pirates are running amok. And what happens is Thomas Jefferson, like I guess during George Washington's time, this guy in Libya basically told George Washington, hey, if you guys give us a lot of money, we won't have our pirates basically blow up your ships and you can go to the Mediterranean. Well, during Thomas Jefferson's reign, or not his reign, but during his presidency, when he became president, he heard about this and he stopped making payments. And so the pirates basically started attacking these areas, attacking ships here in the Mediterranean Sea. And ultimately, Thomas Jefferson will send the American Navy out, and the American Navy will fight and protect them. And this is actually where we get the Marines. There's a Marine song about the shores of Tripoli. And so this is the shores of Tripoli over here. Another issue that's happening at this time that Thomas Jefferson has to deal with was the increasing violence in Europe. And basically at this time, and at the end of his presidency, basically it's a reign of terror, or the beginning of the presidency for Thomas Jefferson. I believe Napoleon takes rule in 1805 and Thomas Jefferson is elected in 1800. So for the first part of his presidency, Thomas Jefferson has a France that is basically being run by Robespierre, right? And like the Committee of Terror and all that stuff. And Napoleon is sending his troops all over here conquering these areas underneath the French Revolution, right? Underneath the flag of the French Revolution. So there's a decision, as our ships are going over here, something that you guys have learned is that both the English and the French are attacking our ships as they enter over here. And they're doing something called impressment, where they're basically seizing the ship, they're seizing the sailors, they're seizing the goods, they're claiming them all as British, they're turning it into a British basically Navy vessel and making the sailors turn into basically Navy men of the British Royal Navy and fighting against the French. And the French are doing the same, So again, out on these oceans, this isn't peaceful times, right? It's like anything goes out in the ocean. You're kind of getting this, whether it be in the Mediterranean Sea or it be over here in Europe as they're coming over. So what Thomas Jefferson does is says, fine, we're going to have an embargo act. Nobody can trade with the British or French, and the French can't trade with us. And this really killed the United States, because the United States was a strong, independent, really mature country. It depended on giving its resources out to get finished goods and trading. It hadn't yet really developed as a strong country at this time. So this actually backfires. This causes like the economy to go down. Nobody is getting ships. Britain's not getting ships from these shipbuilders in the Northeast. Their economy is getting ravished down here. They can't trade any of their tobacco. Now it's moving into cotton and other raw resources and materials. And so it's basically there's no global trade and it's all staying here. A couple of things that Khan Academy will talk about, there's a lot of people that smuggled, right? So they just went to a beach over here and they would trade anyways, and they would avoid the Embargo Act. That was one thing. And like I said, it really backfired on Thomas Jefferson. The economy really went through some really bad times. So here's a political cartoon that's pretty famous about the 1807 embargo. This is the embargo. This is the turtle. And he's stopping this guy, super fine. I think that's sugar. And he goes, oh, this cursed grab me. But actually, he looks right here. Grab me is actually embargo back. And I think this guy is an American guy trying to sell some sugar to a British ship, but cannot do so. So again, a little bit about the Embargo Act. The last thing that happens during Thomas Jefferson is France needs to sell all of this land. This happens kind of when Napoleon takes reign. Napoleon is basically really focused on Europe and could care less about this area at this time. And there's actually a discussion when Thomas Jefferson first goes out. He says, "Let me just get the port of New Orleans, right? That's all I really care about." But after discussions, they find out that France is willing to sell all of its remaining territory here in the United States, and it's a good swath of land that later will be very important to the production of the United States. And so they get it for $15 million. You know, hopefully a theme that you guys are. Hopefully, there's about 2 or 3 themes that this Louisiana territory is going to help you understand. Number one is manifest destiny. And it is going to be the belief that the United States, even though we started here, is going to be able to go all the way to California. And we will eventually, as you know. So that's kind of one theme. And now the purchase of territory, you know, the idea of moving westward. And also you can kind of see this as people moved west from Great Britain to land into Jamestown or the Massachusetts Bay Colony to start a new life, right? And some of the indentured servants, right? Bacon's Rebellion. And then, you know, why we started the French and Indian War is to get this land and move westward. Give our people more land to develop and turn into farms. You can see all of these rivers that were great trade networks to trade their goods. And start having our country develop economically. And so there's a constant march west, and the belief that we were like blessed by God, right? It was our manifest destiny, as in it was a God-given right that we as Americans move from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast, and this is one step in there. You know, one thing I just kind of alluded to is immigration. You know, we constantly see this immigration west. It's not just grabbing territory, but we see young men once again moving west. You know, this will be really true during the cattle ranching of Texas and this area. And then if you really think about the gold mines of San Francisco and Northern California, there's this massive gold mine rush. And who's going? Again, single men. And we can see that same theme that happened here, especially in the South, and especially in Virginia, where we had young men, mainly indentured servants, gaining freedom and developing their own land, right? Rather, up here was bringing more families. And last thing, and I think the most important thing that we need to remember throughout the Louisiana Purchase is that as this moves westward, this is going to be an issue because as these become states, we're going to have to figure out which are going to be free and which are going to be slave, right? And eventually, there's going to be a compromise called the Missouri Compromise. Missouri will come in as a slave state, but this line right here will be the determination between free and slave. And if you were south of that line, you would return to a slave state north of that. So that's kind of like one of the biggest things that historians will look at the Louisiana Purchase. That if it wasn't for this, maybe we could have contained the slavery issue. But once this land opens up, you're going to have to decide where, if slaves are going to be allowed in these territories and then these future states. And, you know, obviously we're going to learn that these compromises are not going to hold too long before there's going to be a fight and there's going to be a civil war over this issue of slavery. All right, guys. So went a little bit longer, but a lot of good detailed information. You can really see that this class is picking up. Even though we're picking up, we do have a lot of time to get this done. So 9 weeks, not 6. So thank you for the reminders. And thanks for the patience in me posting these assignments, guys. But I'll be posting the next few through the week and starting to get a little bit of the rhythm and start catching you guys up. Last thing, I'm a little concerned from students out there. I know that we may be moving out of this distance learning and having in class. Nothing is going to really change about this class. It's all going to continue to be online. So please make the decision that's right for you and your family. There's no pressure to choose either way. You know, some of you may have to come to school because that's what you think is in the best interest of your guys' family and you and your education. So everybody needs to make, unfortunately, really hard decisions during these times, you know. So I just saw like a little pressure going on in class about choosing one way or another. Also, I've heard from a couple of students, they're concerned if that they aren't in the class, if they don't, you know, if they choose distance learning, that this class will be taken away from them. I think the only thing they'll change is these Zoom sessions might be a little bit more in person and you logging in during our class, whatever that may be. So don't worry about it. I'm going to do the best to continue to have this type of learning platform to help you guys be successful. All right, guys, take care, and we'll see you in the next activity.